So everybody, today we're going to be talking about why FOV doesn't physically affect recoil. It is going to be strictly visual, and we're going to showcase that here in the practice range in just a hot second. So I'm going to load into the practice range. I am streaming live, so if you hear me respond to people that would be in chat, it's because I'm currently live streaming this. So I also apologize in advance if I stutter, stammer, if I kind of dance around the point, but I'm going to try to be as direct as humanly possible. You're just going to have to give me a moment. I have a predefined spot in which I'm going to run to. And I'm going to showcase, again, why recoil is strictly visual and why some pros will raise their FOV and why other pros will lower their FOV. So that's what we're going to be walking through and teaching for today. So let me get over to that spot real quick. Let me switch guns. I'm going to use the Type 100 because it's got the most predictable recoil. And I'm going to take a little bit of a zoom in here so you can also see the recoil a bit better visually, because I want you guys to be able to see it. So I'm not using an iron sight. Grab a little bit of ammo. I'm gonna go prone right here, and this is gonna be my centerpiece right there. So again, we're gonna be covering why a pro will use a higher FOV or lower FOV. So before we start, I'm gonna start off with a low FOV. I'm gonna drop my FOV all the way down. Okay. Now recoil is gonna be strictly visual in terms of what it looks like in terms of a change. Now keep in mind, please keep in mind that this applies to all video games, but Battlefield happens to have randomized recoil. So what is randomized recoil? It means that it's not consistent. So whenever you shoot, the gun may kick a little bit more to the right, it may kick a little more higher, and it's a bit random. It's confirmed, and if you look at any of the Symmetric websites or anybody who looks into this, they will confirm that the recoil that comes out of the gun is random. It may have a consistent drive through of where it's supposed to go, but sometimes it'll be random. Low FOV. All right, and I'm gonna turn on ADS FOV. So if anybody's ever curious what this setting does, most video games do not give you the option to change this, like Apex Legends does not. That's a personal preference. It's a design choice. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but ADS field of view takes your current ADS and applies it whenever you aim down sight. That's the concept. So we're going to turn it on because I'm controlling the FOV here, and I want to show you visually what happens whenever you zoom in an ADS. So I'm going to turn that on. If you do not want your gun to be affected by the FOV that you're using here, as you see me go in and out and a little bit spazzy there, then you probably want to have this off. I personally like to have this setting off because whenever I'm zoomed in, I want to physically see what I'm shooting at. Some pros would prefer to see more around them. Now, this is a choice of video game of what you actually physically decide to use. Some, if you play a BR, you may want to have a bigger FOV so you can see around you. Like Battlefield, you may want to run a higher one so then you can see objects around you. Maybe like Rainbow Six, you may want to have one more close up because you are more, I guess, more invested in what's happening point blank. All right? So I'm going to keep the FOV low and I'm going to keep ADS FOV on because I want my zoom to be affected by it. So I'm going to take a few shots and a few mags. I'm going to make sure I'm on the same spot because I want to be able to reproduce this. I'm going to pretty much go prone here and then here. Okay. So right now the ADS doesn't change because this is the lowest FOV and it doesn't look like it's changing because I have ADS FOV on, right? So I'm going to shoot always at this point and I'm just going to hold. I'm not going to control the recoil at all. Okay. So you got to feel for that, right? Same concept. Shoot again. It kicks to the right. I'm using the Type 100 specifically because it's got the most consistent recoil. And it's also quick, so you can kind of see in quick succession what's happening. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the FOV, and I'm going to raise it. I'm going to raise it on the opposite spectrum. Now you're going to look at the recoil pattern, see where that's at visually. I'm going to start shooting. The recoil stops at the same exact spot. That is done intentionally because all you're changing around you in terms of FOV, you're just seeing more around. Think of the FOV like a fisheye lens. You can be up close or you can be far away. Notice how I now see more of my surroundings and where I'm at, but it's not physically changing what's happening on screen. You see how I see more underneath me and now I don't? It looks like I'm more zoomed in. And when I was zoomed in, it looks like the recoil is worse, right? Whenever I kick, you're like, wow, that's a bit harder to control. Still stops at the same spot. Now, keep in mind, the pattern is just because that's the way Battlefield is. You can disagree with it. I disagree with it personally. That's not the conversation we're having here. If you have an interest in that and randomized recoil, I put up a whole video of why I think that's a problem. I'll put in the description down below and also my top comment. So that's the premise of field of view. That's why I'm making this video and why I want to show you guys just how important it is. And I apologize I'm not at the same exact spot, but luckily I had enough ammo to kind of demonstrate it. So that's why you have FOV. And whenever you want to find your perfect FOV, you kind of find a balance. People always ask what my FOV is. I've changed it several times. I personally now like 95. I've played at 90, which is about here. And I've also played at 101. This says horizontal FOV. You got to think this is horizontal. What I'm seeing whenever it goes like this. Now, what is calculating here in the field of view is vertical. The reason why they both have to go hand in hand to give you the nice square box picture. Because if they do not go hand in hand, obviously you're going to have like a stretch resolution and it's just not going to work. Now I'm going to cover the topic of why pros use a higher FOV versus a lower FOV, even though the recoil pattern of what you're seeing is the same exact. Now, the reason why you may run a low field of view is because you want to see the recoil and maybe run a lower sensitivity. Now I'm going to go the opposite spectrum real quick. Let's say I run a high FOV and shoot. The recoil pattern is the same, but if you run a higher sensitivity and you pull down, your brain matches the two together. Does that understand? Does that concept make a whole lot of sense? I hope it does, and I'm going to reiterate it again for you guys. If you run a high FOV and you run a high sensitivity, your brain matches what it sees visually here. These are small movements. Therefore, I must make small hand movements. If you run a lower sensitivity and you do the same premise and you shoot again, the jumps look larger. So if I run a lower sensitivity, the brain says lots of movement must make large movement with hand. As simple as I can break it down. Now, the reality is when you go big brain on this, 200 IQ, 500 IQ plays, is you tell yourself, FOV becomes irrelevant. Whatever I see on screen, my hand movement is always going to be the same. And that's an important concept because it's going to make you a better player, make you a better aimer, and you're going to be way better than the opposition. If you have a camera and you adjust the lens and you have a lower FOV or higher FOV, objects could appear that they're moving faster or slower. So let me close out and say another reason why people run low FOV or high FOV. At a low FOV, if there's a target moving in front of you, and I wish I had an example of this, because the field of view is small, the target will appear that they're moving faster. The same thing can happen with sensitivity. Some people will run a low FOV but run a high sensitivity because the target looks like they're moving faster, so you can adjust and make micro movements quickly to that target. Now when you're zoomed out, the other concept, people will appear as if they're moving slower. They're actually not moving slower in the space. What's happening is that you can see way more and the object that's moving is still moving within the same space within it. Now I'm going to end also with this thought. So when you run high FOV, it looks like I'm moving fast. People are perceived like he's cheating. He's moving extremely fast. He's hacking. This is a problem. No, when I take the same premise and I drop FOV, I'm moving within the same space and I'm moving around. My speed does not change. What is changing is my FOV. Now, the problem when you run a low FOV, some people find this very nauseating because you're so close to the action. So what people do is they balance it out. And the reason why people say that 90 FOV is a sweet spot, and I like my own personal 95 FOV, because you try to match what you visually see as a person. Some people equate it to 90 degrees in terms of FOV, what we can see, but it hasn't, I would need to pull up some like formal scientific documentation. That's just what people say. I don't have anything to base it off of besides word of mouth, and I apologize for that, but I guarantee there's plenty of YouTube videos that'll explain it with a much more clarity than me. But I hope that this tutorial is extremely helpful for anybody trying to understand FOV. You can do the same exact thing in any other game. The only reason why this game is a great example to showcase it is because I can have my ADS FOV, or my ADS field of view, excuse me, yes, I just wanted to say it out loud, affected. And again, a game like Apex, when you think about each of these games, Apex does not let you turn off ADS field of view. It'll always apply your current field of view to your weapons. You can't turn it off. It does not let you turn it off, but Battlefield does. I prefer to turn it off. I just like to see objects that are a lot closer. So that's a personal preference thing and what you want to do. And I can apply the same thing to a sniper. When you look also with the Jungle Carbine and I put a 3x on it, objects will appear larger or smaller when you ADS and aim down sights. It's just the way these guns work. So if I were, because you got to apply it. If I have it off, even if I have it off right now, see how I'm way more zoomed in? The reason why it's taking that FOV is because it's assuming I have the lowest FOV setting. See how there's very minor change here? All zooms are just field of view changes, and they're just putting a PNG file into it. It's literally the best way to explain it. I'm gonna turn this on. You see, I can see way more and targets are smaller. So that's the concept of it. Hopefully that's very helpful. I appreciate you guys for watching. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe for more content, and I'll see you guys next time. Just to add a little bit more, the FOV, the best way to look at FOV as a sniper is as if it's one big PNG file. You can even see it. This is just a PNG file. That's all it is. Or like, you can maybe add some like graphic effect. When you look around like old shooters and everything, this is a PNG file that's thrown on top of it. See how the camera, and I did this max FOV to this to be dramatic. Notice how the zoom around is zooming in on the same thing. Now, when I take this concept, look what's happening to the camera here. Isn't this the same thing like zooming down sights? Let's pretend I'm sniping. I'm sniping. I'm sniping now. See? The same thing. You notice how this is just a background right now with it? That's the concept that you're applying to it. You have to remember that when you aim down sights, your sensitivity gets slower. There are some games like Apex and Battlefield where they apply sensitivity where you can change it. Aim down sights is the same as your hip fire. So right now, as an example, I have my hip fire and it moves this way, but when I aim down sights, it could be slower or faster depending if I have certain settings on. So how you would do that is you would change the sensitivity to match the hip fire. This one's not accurate. I was messing around with stuff on the back end. But if I wanted my hip fire 1.25x to match the 1x sensitivity, which is the same as my hip fire, then that's why the movement feels like it's more dramatic for recoil. I feel like I had to address that because I feel like people are going to say, well, the sensitivity, something feels different. You can change that setting. You can change it. You can change it. You can change it. You can match your hip fire to the scope sensitivity. So when you're zoomed in, it still matches the same inches per 360 of what you're trying to do. The reason why realistically you want to slow down your sensitivity when you're aimed down sight is because the movement is so dramatic. And sometimes it's better to have them on screen and just make a minor correction with a bit of your arm rather than have it go across the screen and make a micro adjustment with your hand. This comes down to personal preference. There's no right or wrong with it. So there's no right or wrong in terms of making that decision.